Hi family, friends, Smart Candle here. I wanted to make a brief video explaining a few of the details of the Colt 1873 single action army revolver. What you're looking at here was made in 2021 in Italy by the Uberti company, started by Aldo Uberti, and a fellow named Mike Harvey. He owns a company called Cimarron Firearms, and he actually went over and met with Mr. Uberti and told him if he brought him a proper Colt and said, if you can copy this thing in exact detail and use the highest quality materials and make a fine product, I'll sell it in the United States for you. So this particular model is it's called the Model P, which I believe just stands for the Peacemaker. And what you're looking at here is the numbers stamped on the gun. I don't know if I can get this focused good enough. You see the original patent was September, what's that say, 1871, where the Colt company first patented this design. Then they had another patent in 1872 where they entered it in the competition with the Army to be used as an Army revolver. And so that's why in 1873 the Army adopted this particular handgun, and that's why it's called the 1873 Single Action Army. And there's 4 clicks that are involved. Everybody calls it the COLD, your LT for Colt. And well, I guess I should also point out that this particular model is a 357 or 38 special, and these 3 particular rounds I have right here. The first is a Remington 38 special, and then it's a Federal 38 special, which is copper jacketed. And then this one here is a Hornady 357 Magnum with the copper jacket and the plastic tip. They make a big mess out of whatever they hit. But a couple of things I wanted to explain. I watch a whole ton of videos. Probably I've seen at least 50 videos about this gun. And they call it the multi-generations, and they say the first generation was 1873 through 1941 when Colt stopped making them, and then they started making them again in 1956. They referred to that as the second generation, and then in 54th or 56 or something, these multiple generations. But actually, as far as I'm concerned, and true people who are true historians of this gun, the first generation of this gun was, like I showed you, patented in 1871. 1872 they actually started the manufacturing, competed. In 1873 the Army adopted it, so that's how it got its name. And that first generation, as you can see here, let me see if I can. This here is a set screw. Actually, I guess I'll pick the gun up and show you. That is a set screw. This particular model, Mike Henry had his redesigned with that it protrudes out farther and it has the burling on the edge where you can twist it with your thumb to keep it in. It also has a screw head design on it. The original 1871 Colts, that screw was more flush to the casing and it was kind of rounded, and you actually had to use a screwdriver to take it out. So, by the way, I put my own silver snakes on this particular model. It didn't come with them. The first generation, let me show you a picture over here on my computer. I was looking at the Colts, and they all have the side-mounted pin. That didn't come along until 1896. Until then, the original, here's the Cimarron Model P, the same model I have, well, almost, that's a 4 3/4, and you can see it has that set screw. Now that would be indicative of the, and by the way, my pistol sits in an exact replica of Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name outfit. And it's also a 357 Magnum 38 Special, which matches my Henry. And by the way, that's a one-of-a-kind custom-made 30-06. It's German Mauser bolt action, British firearms barrel, and Rolls-Royce carved the stock. But back to this particular pistol. So the first generation would actually be 1773 through 1896. In 1896, Colt removed this pin and they put that spring-loaded button right here. Now that thing has a half moon cut in it. When you push it in, the half moon lines up with the with the cylinder rod pin, and it lets you pull that pin out. Now another thing that these things have, actually it's easier to see on this side, these cylinder pins have 2 notches in them. You can see one of them right here. And if I was to pull that screw, back it out a little bit, then I could pull this pin out, and that would release the cylinder. But I can pull this pin out and back it up. Well, right now it's set in the firing position. If I loosen it up, I could push this pin in, and that little groove right there would line up with this here. And what that does is it takes that cylinder rod and it pushes it through to the back side in here, and it would prevent the hammer from actually contacting you can see like the firing pin on that hammer, it would be in contact with the primer. Now the original design of this car, it has what they call the 4 clicks for Colt, but the original design was so that it had a safety mechanism. In fact, the original Army in 1873, their instructions to all their soldiers was to carry the weapon in the first click position. Now listen. 1 click. See how that hammer sets back like that? It only pulled it back a tiny bit. And now you can see in that firing pin is no longer in contact with the primer. And that's the way you are supposed to carry these things, and that's very strong. You could whack on that pretty good and it's not going to fire. And it also locks the trigger in place where it won't move. Now the second click, and by the way, the 4 clicks are made because there's 3 grooves cut on the back of this hammer arm. And so when you pull it back, there's also a large spring. Some of them have a rod with a coil spring, but this one has a flex spring mounted inside the handle, and that spring comes in contact with both the arm of the trigger and the hammer arm. So the first click is that the first groove cut onto this hammer arm coming in contact with the spring, holding it in place in this safety position. And the trigger's locked and it won't move. It wasn't until the 1956 model, what they call the second generation, where that groove was the same, but it wasn't quite as strong, and there was a few incidents where this safety mechanism didn't hold properly and the gun fired and they had a problem. So after that they started, calling it the John Wayne load, where you load 1, skip a cylinder, and load 4. That way your firing pin's not resting on an open cylinder. Well, the Army wanted you to load all 6 shots and not throw away one. I would never load it with 5. I just leave my gun. This particular gun, the notch is strong enough that you could whack that hammer pretty darn hard and it's not going to fire this gun because you can trust this mechanism. Now the second position, the second click, that also sets the trigger and it releases the cylinder, so now the cylinder can click. That clicking you hear right there, that comes from down in, if I can get zoomed in on it, there would be a cylinder locking little knob that pops up out of there. Right now it's removed so you can move it. That rod is what contacts this spot on the cylinders, and that would be the loading spot. In the third click, what it does is it moves the trigger, it engages the trigger, and it also sets the pin in place underneath there. That's the third click you hear is actually that pin, and the fourth click is the fourth click or the third notch on this engaging with the spring. So the 4 clicks, you never want to release that without pulling it all the back. Never pull it back to half cock and then try to pull it back. That's not good. You'll wear the system out better. But there's a pin under there. Now maybe you can see it there, that little notch. And that thing will actually drop down. See it drop like a, see that go up and down right there at the bottom of the cylinder? That's the very first thing that starts to move when this thing, as well as the notch, will engage for the, right now it's in the safety position. And you wouldn't want to pull the trigger from there. You'd always, before you pull the trigger, always pull it back and then pull the trigger and release it. See how the hammer rests firmly against the casing right there? But if I pull it back, 1 click. That's the safety mechanism. Trigger won't pull, hammer won't move. That's what it's intended for. There's a secondary safety system on this thing that, if, let's say you were in the Old West, you were going to go riding for 60 miles or something, and you wanted to make sure your gun was safer than safe, that's when you would unscrew the screw here, and you pull the hammer back to half cock, so it's out of the way. And if this screw is backed off enough to where it's not engaging that pin, you can push that pin in further, like that. See how that pin, and what it did, when that pin goes in this way here, it also pops out back here. I could show you by looking inside there. If I don't know if you can get a good view of it, but that pin right there, see how it popped out there? That keeps the hammer from striking. So that's a secondary safe position. After you put it there, then you screw your screw back in, and that hammer, it would, now it's impossible to strike the bullet. In fact, if I release it, it's not, see, it stops even farther back than the original safety design. So that's the secondary safety design on these things. That's what the 4 clicks are. The first one engaging the spring on the back of the hammer. The second one is the click of actually the trigger engaging on that spring. The third click is the pin down here makes that third click, and the fourth click comes from the hammer again. So that's what the source of the sound when you hear the 4 Colt clicks. In fact, just for the fun of it, let's back it off, release it. Well, it won't release all the way because the pin's in the way. In fact, I'm going to back that, put it back in the firing position. The newer designs, they have that pin right there. You just push the pin. Makes it a lot easier to do this process, but I don't mind. The collectability of this gun is because it is more in line with the original 1871 patent. And the new screw that Mike Henry had designed, not only is it easier to do with your fingers, it's designed to, it really won't come out all the way. You'd almost have to turn it hard to get it to pull out farther than what it is. So I should be able to back that pin out. I'll set the screw in. In fact, where it is now, you can see the two separate grooves. I'm going to turn the screw in until I can feel it contact that rod. And somewhere right about that, yeah, right about there, it'll screw all the way in, because this set screw is actually in the right position with that. You can feel it. Yep, everything's tight, feels good. And now in this position, this gun would fire. And now, from that position, all 4 clicks. That's your COLT. So that explains a couple of things about the 4 clicks, the safety mechanism on this gun, and I trust mine. And also, they changed this pin system in 1870 or 90. I don't know why I keep getting that date wrong. 1896. They changed the screw to the pin. They also changed the design of the injector. This one, the round one here, they called that the bullseye. They changed it to a half moon design, so it was a little different. And then, so to me, in true historians, the first generation would be with the set screw. The second generation is the side-mounted pin. The third generation, I think, was in maybe 1920 or something like that. They actually designed it to where you didn't have to have it in half cock to turn the cylinder like this. All you had to do is open the load gate, and that would lift the turn. So that would, to my thinking, that's your first generations. First one was with the screw, second one with the side pin, the third one was the open gate to spin the cylinder. To me, that's the real true first 3 generations of the Colt peace, keeper. Anything beyond that, what they call the other generations, okay, they can call them what they are, but to me, that's how this gun operates, and I would consider those the proper first 3 generations. Have a good day, y'all.